Good morning, I am Dr. Maya John. I teach at Jesus and Mary College. My views as an activist, as a stakeholder in the university system about autonomy and the challenge it poses to public funded higher education is basically this. When we think of education, especially in a country like ours, where there's so much ingrained inequality, the question is that whatever we do with education should always be an improvement from what is already there. So you take what you have and you try to make sure that it's more accessible as a facility and more inclusive. But the conjunction which we are currently talking about, quote unquote educational reforms, and very specifically I'm using quotes because I don't see these as reforms. I see this as experimentation. I see this as a new education policy being pushed through where centers of quality education, college education are being experimented with so that they sync better with the existing corporate market needs for a particular kind of skilled labor. Now the point is that with the coming in of autonomy in the University of Delhi, it's important that we don't just speak out of the hat, and as a trade union activist, it's very important for one to engage with documents, so government documents here become very important, and I'd like to share that with viewers, with readers, because when we talk about autonomy in the context of the kind of guidelines that are circulating, the kind of draft memorandums of understanding that the UGC is passing on to college principals, chairpersons of governing bodies of colleges, these documents are actually essential for us to look at because they can show us the full paradigm in which quote unquote reforms are being envisaged, autonomy is being envisaged. Now they, of course, the documents also talk about it in terms of graded autonomy, and they keep emphasizing this is academic autonomy. It's not as if the individual unit, that's the college, would be separated from UGC, the University Grants Commission funding. So they keep blanket, keep this kind of soft coating it as a graded process, and it's not something that's going to entail financial repercussions. But again, looking at the same documents, and if you table these documents in front of government officials like the HRD minister, etc., I'm sure they will run out of things to say because I'm talking about the Chaturvedi committee recommendations and guidelines for how should autonomy be pushed through. We're talking about the March circular released by the HRD minister, in which so many universities and colleges were declared autonomous based on their NAAC rankings. And many of those institutions did not necessarily apply for, we know for example JNU did not even apply for an autonomous status. So it's, there are these mechanisms that they're not sharing the details of in one go, but it comes and it hits you like an encounter killing from the back, which is we have a particular NAAC score 3.5 for example, then you can automatically, without a committee, without a peer review system, get autonomous status. So there are all these documents that we can look at, and I want to point out from, for example, the Chaturvedi committee recommendations, that it categorically says that you can design your own courses, etc., but it says to teach those courses it is only guest and visiting faculty. Now place these kind of arguments in an existing system of higher education in University of Delhi, for example, where you have a huge number of ad hoc teachers working. Very often ad hoc teachers, and one semester an ad hoc, next semester a guest, because workloads fluctuate, and we're talking about this already vulnerable condition in which you're going to impose autonomous status to or give autonomous status to certain colleges which you think are good, and this is going to snowball into more contractual, more insecure jobs to teach these new designed courses. The second aspect in those those documents and the Chaturvedi recommendations are things like the grant which will come under autonomy module cannot be used, very categorically it says, cannot be used to calculate new posts or positions. So this means automatically that somewhere, even though it's saying we're only talking about academic freedom here, curricula here, that actually somewhere also hinting at very clearly that how will the funding somewhere work? And the funding is going to work like this, that you have to generate the resources yourself, use it only in the context of guest teaching. That means short-term work contracts. And 3, you're not going to allow institutions to move forward with permanent positions. Okay, and everything has to be, contextualized in the sense that where are all these documents going to be enforced, these modules going to be enforced in an already problematic situation where permanent interviews of so many teachers who are working on ad hoc in University of Delhi is being continuously postponed. We're talking about a situation where very easily colleges like to convert ad hoc positions which are at par with somewhere at par in terms of pay, etc., with permanent positions into guest positions. So there's already this culture of insecurity, vulnerability, and this does affect teaching. It does affect the academic life, because imagine a person who's pursued an MPhil, PhD, at the end of 5 years all they can get is a 25,000 rupees or 24,000 rupees guest position. And let's not forget that the academic freedom which institutions like St. Stephen's are racing after and applying for, let's not forget that, what is the nature of those courses going to be? I mean, they're going to require a certain number of takers, and if there are not a certain number of minimum students in the class, the teacher can forget about any kind of, secure employment. Those courses are also going to be expensive courses, and this is what brings in the question of the students' point of view here in very categorical terms. For the teachers movement, for the people's movement that's talking about saving a university like Delhi, talking about saving public funded education, it's very important to see what is already happening. We are part of a university system, and I'm not proud of saying this, where their centers of excellence for decades have existed, okay, St. Stephen's, SRCC, Hindu, LSR, etc., JMC, and the centers of excellence over the decades have only catered to a particular, largely catered to a particular section of society. And with the coming in of autonomy, with the coming in of graded autonomy, where, self-finance courses, your own courses, and hence fee structures can be correspondingly decided by the college itself, is going to mean huge fee hikes. And for a situation where we already are grappling with the intake of getting in, people from different segments of society, being able to provide quality education to a large number of people. We're already struggling with that, and we know that, for example, in St. Stephen's College, the fees has already been for so many years so high. We know that in the University of Delhi, for one course, if one college is charging 6,000 rupees, another college, a trust college, will charge 25,000 rupees. So disparity to pehle se hai, and that is going to increase with the coming in of graded autonomy, especially when institutions have to, dig their own heels into the market and generate funds. So that would mean that rather than allowing for the last person in the list, the last person in the line to get into Delhi University, we're going to actually facilitate more and more exclusion. And that is not a reform. That is not something that a public funded university should be proud of experimenting with. Okay? Our country needs more universities, our country needs more colleges, our country needs the disparity within existing colleges to reduce. Not that those that are already excellent then break away. So these are the points of views that I think from the students is a huge challenge, which is why, for example, the Delhi University Teachers Association is consciously, using the mobilization of student organizations, etc., to expose this question of how autonomy will affect even students' life and intake. Apart from that, if we look at the issue from the point of view of research students, I've already highlighted this, that teaching in the university level has to be a profession which allows for dynamism and progression. So there has to be an element of career progression. But already when we are seeing so many people languish in the teaching market, university teaching market, after doing the MPhils, PhDs, etc., and just never getting those permanent jobs. And there's so much insecurity about, semester wise, whether you'll be retained somewhere or not as an ad hoc teacher or as a guest teacher. in such a scenario, I mean, what are we teaching graduates who are coming out of the university system? That, you know, after you finish your bachelor's or after you finish your MA, I know colleagues have started, you know, advising that, you know, have other plans, don't necessarily just think कि net exam दे देंगे और फिर यही एक career बना लेंगे, क्योंकि यहाँ पे बहुत ज़्यादा insecurity है. So I think in terms of the way in which the university teaching career is also being stunted with this push towards autonomy, with this push towards this whole module of you know, getting individual colleges which have performed well over the past few decades to break away. I would also say that, you know, we have to always connect the dots, you know, connect the push towards autonomy with other kinds of policies which have been playing themselves out for the last few years. And I'm not just holding this government accountable. I know many of these, you know, the wheels started turning during UPA 1, UPA 2 as well. But the point is that, you know, we have to connect the dots in the sense that, you know, in the past few years we have seen the amount of the union budget that has been allocated for higher education, particularly the amount that has been given to the UGC, has successfully been reduced, okay, and it, you know, immediately the repercussions have been in terms of just to mention a few years back, मुश्किल से 2 साल पहले, we know that the fellowships and the non-net fellowship JRF वगैरह को लेकर there's been so much, you know, backlash, withdrawing of funds, which is why, especially on the question of non-net fellowship, etc., scholars had to go and camp outside UGC and protest. So we know that is, you know, that is a problem that has emerged because successive governments have reduced public expenditure on higher education. 2, we also know that, and here I hold the particular regime definitely more accountable, deciding themes for PhD research has become such a problematic phenomena. We know this has started at the state level universities, and even in certain you know, interactions at the UGC level, in certain meetings, we have come to know that there is this, you know, increasingly this kind of talk that, you know, there will be a certain list of research topics. And to be very honest, you know, research funding bodies like ICSSR, ICHR have revamped their, you know, their proposal schemes for research. Themes, suitable themes that they will be willingly you know, extending funding to, have been revamped in the last 1 or 2 years. Look what has happened to Nehru Memorial and the nature of the funding and the fellowships provided there. For such a long time, many of these institutions did not regularly meet to decide on funding and to award fellowships. So there is this phenomena also which is connected to this larger game of, you know, we want to clean up the higher education system, we want to bring in reform, make it more productive, make it more quality based. Is quality meaning reduction in funds, not giving fellowships, you know, revamping the scheme of research topics to such a way that they become government praising rather than critical research? Another very crucial issue here that, you know, again in terms of connecting the dots, the net exam has been reduced to twice a year to once a year, because there is this whole, you know, calculation की जितने लोग उसको क्लियर करेंगे साल में 2 बार, उतना ज़्यादा सिस्टम पे प्रेशर पड़ेगा कि आपको फेलोशिप्स देनी है या आपको जॉब्स क्रिएट करनी है. So there are all these things that we need to see in terms of you know, the connected things that are playing themselves out, practices and developments that are playing themselves out, and place the push towards autonomy, the push towards NAAC scores, okay, good NAAC scores, connect the dots, connected to these existing phenomena. I would also like to say that, you know, we have to bring in here, of course, the two segments of society here that whose interests we need to consider. One is, of course, an already existing middle class segment of youth who exist as, you know, of course, teachers, researchers and students in our university system, and they have been the main beneficiaries of public funded education up till now, but even they are threatened today in terms of the push towards autonomy and the kind of long-term financial repercussions that is going to have. No middle class home would want to pay 2 lakhs for BA Sociology, you know, and certain disciplines will increasingly become less popular because of, you know, changes in fee structure, etc. But apart from that, there's another segment of society, youth of our country, whose issues need to be brought to the forefront. And here particularly I'm talking about young people who pass their 12th class exams from government schools, anywhere scoring between 35% to 60%, okay. That is what I meant to say earlier, the last in the queue, the last in the line, okay. Where are they in any of our government's envisioning of higher education reforms, you know? Are these people who are languishing in the margins of higher education, be it in terms of distance learning or the school of correspondence, to be very specific, in Delhi University, how are we talking about providing them better education facilities? Because we're only talking about Hindu College, LSR College, St. Stephen's College, and how to make them autonomous and give them the freedom to design their courses. But what about the freedom of providing a student who's desperate to break out of the cudgels of, you know, age-old family occupation of being a street vendor? So nobody wants to be a street vendor like their father or their mother. Everybody has aspirations, or nobody wants to work on the same factory floor as their father. Even working class families want their children to move up. But what about those thousands, lakhs of dreams we crush every year? Especially these kind of reforms are crushing every year, in terms of we're not thinking about the fact, simple fact, कि हम ऑटोनॉमी और उस टाइप के रिफॉर्म्स की बात करें, हम अभी तक ये भी एनविसाज नहीं कर पा रहे हैं कि डिस्टेंस लर्निंग मोड में स्टूडेंट्स को प्रॉपर क्लासेस दी जाए, गिने चुने 10-12 क्लासेस साल में नहीं, परंतु प्रॉपर क्लासेस दी जाए, नए कॉलेजेस खोले जाए ताकि उनको वहाँ पे अब्जॉर्ब किया जाए. दीज आर नॉट इन दी डिसीजन मेकिंग, पॉलिसी मेकिंग level anywhere of concern. So I think we need to see and connect the dots in terms of what is the crisis right now, what is the nature of higher education, how exclusive, how problematic it already is, and we also need to look at the fact that how much more needs to be done and how many parallel developments need to be connected, and then we need to see why autonomy in a place like Delhi University and other public funded universities is going to become a huge problem.